Thank you, Naeem. So with that being said, we really appreciate everyone who's attended and listened. This is just our perspective on what the challenges could look like, some of the solutions that we can offer, and some resources to kind of collaborate and overcome some of these challenges by contributing in open source environments, as well as projects to help build your career and professional skill sets. Um, that's pretty much it for our presentation. Are there any questions? While we wait for questions, I would like to say that a lot of this information involves different project concepts. So I'd like to also note in the recording that there are resources that you can find more about each project as well as other projects. If you look into our public invention GitHub repository, that can be found at github.com/public or PUVINV/ the project name. Let me see if I can actually find the general link, and I'll put it in the chat so others can easily access our public repositories.
I have a question.
Yes.
Just a moment. I was wondering I noticed some of you are softer spoken, which is great, and how you address that if you're working with people who are like talking over you or interrupting you, and you know, try to hold your own in the conversation.
That's actually a really great question. I myself have seen this, whether in STEM or just in the workplace in general, and I can personally say that I found that the most success comes from speaking outwardly about first starting with gratitude, but acknowledging their statement and then kind of reversing it in a way that's productive for both parties. So for me, this will look like, hey, I need this, give me this. And then you could easily be concerned because you're like, that's not my role. I don't have that information. I wonder why he's assuming I have that information. So in that scenario, you can easily deflect in a very respectful manner by saying, I understand the need for this. Although I don't contain this and I don't have responsibility for this, I'm happy to assist you in finding this. I would recommend in the future using XYZ resource to be successful and utilize that. If it's something I'm presenting in a case where I feel like, hey, I'm giving this presentation on numbers, or let's say a budget, a bill of materials, or why you chose a certain material over another for, let's say, a medical device, and someone was to cut me off. In that case, it's very technical and directly tied to my project. I would say, I really understand your concern. I appreciate you vocalizing this concern and feedback. It's giving me something to go back and think about and consider with this design. Before this decision, I assumed this stance because of X credential, Y evidence, or Z budget allocation. We didn't have enough budget to make that better choice, or it didn't work as malleable, it didn't have the same inner diameter, it didn't meet this need or functionality, which is a current engineering requirement of the project. And those are just like specific examples that come to my mind that I've had to kind of respectfully turn back as to, I really appreciate the constructive feedback. I really appreciate that idea. Thank you for including me and bringing that into the conversation to make this a more robust product or outcome. However, XYZ was my stance, which helps to reaffirm so it doesn't get cut off or ignored. But there's probably many ways to approach this. I don't want to speak for the other women. I know they're not here necessarily. I know Nagam is, but I don't know if she has an example as well that she can attest to of like how to handle those types of conversations that might be a bit dismissive or presumptuous in a way.
So actually, I'm the kind of soft speaker person, and this happens to me. I think this happens to a lot of women. I think in statistics we can show how men are more likely to interrupt women than women are likely to interrupt men or in general anybody. So um, when I noticed this, I started looking for tools to use in conversations when I'm getting interrupted. And one way was to not stop talking when you're interrupted. Just keep going. And this actually works. I never know that. It's easy. You know, you don't have to do anything. You just keep talking, keep focusing on your point, and maybe you need to uh, raise your voice a little bit higher just to get the message out there. Okay, I did not finish speaking, and it's like demanding uh, the other person to hear you, and it works. Did we answer your question?
I know that it may come across like I'm soft-spoken, and I guess I am. Um, but I have a way of handling meetings that doesn't really tolerate that type of behavior, you know, interruption and disrespect and things like that. Um, I have been on calls, like really large group collaborative calls where there's one person who is obviously dominating the conversation and almost like patronizingly talking to everyone as if they're not very smart. Um, I have no problem being the person who puts the edge on the words and says, you know, we need to move along here. We're already aware of this information. We need to move on to the next subject. Um, I agree with Nagam that uh, if you're interrupted, yes, just keep talking. You know, finish your thought, maybe extend your thought. And um, uh, changing the tone of voice helps a little bit. Um, just slightly, put a little edge because especially if you're in a leadership position or if it's a meeting that you're in charge of, it's okay to be the leader, you know, even with your voice.
Yeah. Okay, I have a question for you actually. So I know that in medicine, it can often be more common since you interact with various levels of education of so many people throughout the day. Like one shift can include like 20, 40 people in interactions all day compared to an engineer who sees the same individuals over and over and over. And I've had this discussion with peers who are in medicine or engineers full time. And I was just wondering, what's your perspective on how to handle, I guess, like a workplace conflict if you don't see that person frequently versus if you were to see them frequently?
Yeah, I know this one a lot. Um, it's very actually a very personal subject. Um, the way I dealt with it is I went part-time and I removed myself from that environment as much as I could because I saw that none of my efforts were going to result in a change in environment. And sometimes the people that were in the leadership position to manage that situation actually empowered the perpetrators. So um, not everyone has that luxury of being able to remove themselves from the environment, though. Um, things like that, workplace conflicts is a direct source of why people disengage from their workplace and they find another job. And sometimes you have to do that. Um, a conflict, someone that you don't see every day as opposed to someone you do see every day. I mean, you can kind of avoid that person that you don't see every day. But if you're working, 5/8, and that person also works 5/8 in the office next to you, it can be hard to avoid them. Um, if you have the right mediator, if you have someone who you know, you could sit down in a 3 or 4 person group and like hash things out. So, you know, sometimes there can be benefit to that. I think workplaces are very, very political and corporate, and it can be really dangerous to speak your mind and point out um, legitimate issues because the person who speaks out is often named the troublemaker. That's another factor that a solitary person can't solve. That is the culture out there. It is becoming increasingly more unsafe to speak out in a lot of different ways. So you have to take it on a case by case basis. You know, a lot of it depends on what kind of circle of support do you have. Um, is this person someone who has been a problem for a long time? Is the hospital like ignoring their bad behavior and sweeping it under the rug? You know, do they have write-ups? Um, are you another person who's, you know, complaining? Another thing that you can do, if it's, you know, a clinical safety or a personnel safety issue, is you can do incident reports. And if you do an incident report in the internal reporting system, every hospital has one. That's something that has to be paid attention to because there's a record made of it. And even if it's something like this person is being aggressive towards me and you know, they know that I have an allergy to scents and they wear very heavy perfume or heavy cologne every day and I have to sit next to them. Like even that is a form of harassment. So you know, you have to document this. You have to document the behavior and report it. And if it gets to the point where nothing is done and it's disturbing your peace, then you may have to remove yourself from the environment. It really, you have to evaluate it on a personal level.
Good advice. I appreciate you coming off mic to kind of address that question. I'm curious if there are any questions from the male attendees. I don't think I've ever gotten one directly from a gentleman, so I'm curious to see if there are any questions maybe that they might have lingering or any thoughts even, or just kind of curious how you guys took the material, I guess.
Well, it's kind of a hard subject because the well, this is Lawrence, by the way. Because I mean, it also is like very varied between like what experience you came into. Like in my experience, most of my undergraduate, I actually had a pretty high concentration of female classmates. And I've worked with quite a few, but in my professional field, like there's been like a few here and there, but it's not been like a lot of it. I think one of the problems that I think like we run across, and I've seen this in other fields too. But like I think it just kind of goes all the way back down to like middle school, grade school, high school, where we get taught. But I feel like there's not a good balance of how to teach like gender inequality and gender interactions on both sides, for like how to deal with like a lot of interpersonal relationships that um, people kind of get locked into a particular way of doing things, and then they don't know how to like correct for that. And sometimes when they maybe they overcome their own personal biases, sometimes they learn the wrong lessons, and then they perpetuate it in ways they don't really intend to. And I think it's really hard to both be critical on yourself on how to improve yourself, and then also realize that sometimes the things that you do may have repercussions or unintended reactions when you are put in a position of power, and you are then in a position um, to either be your own work, be somebody else's own worst enemy. So it's a really interesting question. Like, how do you both like celebrate the individual and the creativity, and then also like learn from those, learn the right lessons, I guess. So
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, I appreciate you coming off and kind of sharing that, because I think we were talking about this as co-speakers actually. Like, it's really hard and a kind of difficult subject to dance along the lines, because you never know when it's like, you know what I mean? I think the public often talks about women in STEM and open source and how like you're a minority group, you're not often supported, your resources, but that doesn't change the difficulty of the opposite lens, right? Like, men might not know how to interact with women that are the minority case, or how to like solve conflict, or have those, like, what are the right lessons, as you said, like where is it okay to learn from and where is it too much? And I kind of wanted to think about how to take this, if there was like a future series, and create like a workshop for like allowing, like, I guess, different identities and gender to kind of ask like what's okay to like do in this scenario, or like how to handle certain situations where it's like, okay, I'm an ally, but I'm not even sure how to navigate this, or I had this experience, I had no intention of this, but it came off as this. Like, how would I learn from that or prevent that in the future? And I think this kind of goes into that realm, because I can't speak for the opposite, right? Like, I can't speak to your experiences or say that I fully understand them to your degree of perception, but I'd like to. And I think that, going back to the slides, like that's that slide where it takes all genders to kind of foster inclusivity, right? Um, because I can't know both perspectives just as you. So that's interesting. And I really appreciate you sharing it, honestly.
thank you.
So one thing I'd like to share, it's not so much on the side of the interaction and conflict resolution side of things, and more just sort of a success story slash hope for the future. But I'm a mentor for a high school robotics team, and one of the things that the team has done, sort of the team as a whole, including the students and the mentors and sort of everything sort of organically, or rather the organization has managed to create a system where a lot of the female students feel empowered to be leaders. They don't feel the same stigmas you're referring to. They don't feel like they can't speak up, or that the men don't feel like they have a place to talk over the women. They're from that age, they start with, we are equal, and if your idea is better, I'm going to listen to you because it's better, not because I'm a man. That whole thing somehow, I don't know if it's just that it's continually reinforced or what, but that's never an issue. And you don't see the girls basically backing down if their idea is good, and you don't see the guys backing down if their idea is good. So it's just a whole lot more of an even playing field. And I think a lot of what contributes to that is we've got women in leadership positions in addition to men, and we have a lot of women in technical positions where they're providing key feedback and creating designs and doing design reviews and leading and teaching other students that are younger classmen. And so there's never this view that there's a difference. And potentially, obviously, if you have a long history at a company, that company probably is not going to be able to start from that situation. But when we're talking about high school robotics, where the freshmen come in and that's all they've seen, you know, we've seen that, and I wouldn't say it was sort of planned that that's how it should work, although we definitely did plan to try to encourage the girls to take leadership positions, but that just sort of naturally fell out of it. It was really interesting. And I suspect that as more women gain confidence and speak their mind and don't let themselves be talked over, etc., that will sort of naturally evolve.
No, thank you so much for sharing that experience. I mean, I got really choked up personally because like being a girl, especially one that pursued STEM, there are definitely moments where I felt really encouraged by some of my peer groups. So I can imagine how supportive that environment could feel. So it's awesome to hear and awesome to know that like you're contributing to creating safe places and fostering those groups, as well as encouraging the next generation to come up to be very supportive and inclusive. So that's really, really encouraging to hear. And I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, one of the things I think is really awesome about the robotics angle in high school in general is that it creates a community where there's a collaborative environment as opposed to a competitive environment. I know there's competitions in between like schools, but like it creates a collaborative environment that I think it allows everyone to participate at an equal level footing. And you don't get a lot of opportunities of that like that in school, cross gender. And I think the only examples I can think of are like debate, maybe theater, maybe band, but not something that's where it's something that's I guess taking. I think robotics as a project I think takes itself more seriously, and I think it has a lot more application to your everyday or your future engineering or even science endeavors. So I'm really glad that that's been a trend in education in the last 10, 20 years.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. I agree. I think when I was a kid, we didn't have a robotics club, but we had mathletes. And I remember going to mathletes and being like one of the only girls there. And it was so much fun because you just go and compete and contribute to like a team, and then they're rooting for you. You know what I mean? Like the upperclassmen or the guys that you contribute on the project with. And it's like you said, like to see education or institutions of education simulate environments co-ed where you can collaborate in a non-competitive way but still go out and have an element of competition to like bring you together, it really is inspiring. And I remember, I mean, maybe that's why I feel more confident in my math skills than like my physical prototyping skills personally. But I think that those environments really do shape confidence in women and future leaders in ways they don't realize. Because like I never, to be honest, not until today, I never actually paid too much mind to like my mathlete years, you know? Like orchestra or mathletes. Like I never really thought like, this is affecting me in a way later. But now that I think about it in the context you guys are bringing up, it's showing me like it really was meaningful to me, like in seventh, eighth grade or high school. And like that kind of was my confidence to go into science and stuff. And then from there, I could major in engineering and feel like, like I can go in this class and know I can make it or I can do well and feel confident in my ability to succeed. So that's really, really pivotal to kind of talk about not only tonight, but just in general and recognize like you're right. Those words do make a big difference.
Another thing I'll mention is that in the beginning, I mean, our team started in 2008. Me and one other mentor and two teachers at the school started it, and the mentors and the teacher are still there. One of the two teachers is still there. And when we started, I think first year we had maybe 3 girls, and the second year we had 1 girl. It was definitely a male dominated club at the school. But for the last, I want to say 4 or 5 years, we've had more than half women on the team. So, and that's driven because as the team grew with more women on it, they talked to their friends, or their younger sister knew that their older sister was on it and was successful, etc. And then it became normal. And it's 15 years in or whatever it is, but still, it doesn't take that long before that's just normal. And then you know, half of the population also decides that that's just as equally valid for them as it is for the other half.
That's a good point. You know, like one to see it in a decade is really fast, like you said. So there's no reason not to start today or as soon as you can to start enacting that change. But you're right. Like I think it's really cool to see that the majority actually became women, or it was evenly split with women. Because I think
It's
in a
actually
way,
technically majority. I mean, it's not by much, but like 53 or something like that percent. Yeah.
yeah, no, because so I've met several electrical engineers that were women, and then they switched into biomed because the environment was extremely difficult for them to remain in for the entire term of undergrad. And they actually ended up staying in biomed because they felt like, oh, I enjoyed being here. I love studying. Half of it is girls, if not more, are women than men. And it's not to say they don't enjoy collaborating with men, but they just felt comfortable to like, I guess, endure the academic load and to fail to succeed to contribute. And so I think it's really cool to see that in a robotics lens because I know a lot of women will leave certain electrical fields because of a fear of the experiences. Like that it shaped them to feel very isolated and alone. Even though they would have continued, like they would have enjoyed to stay there and take that coursework. So to see with a group that you're mentoring, it impacting women to not only bring in their siblings and their friends and other women in the institution, but also to encourage mentorship, to encourage them to stay. That's huge. I think that's really huge.
I actually have a question. And I would like to hear from our not our speakers, but the audience, if possible. So what advice would you give to women who feel overwhelmed by balancing work and life? And how do you balance your professional responsibilities with personal ones?
I think there's times of balance. There's seasons of balance. And there's times when you're not going to have any balance. When I am in the middle of a disaster response, I have no work-life balance at all. And that's something that I'm aware of. And I go into that time knowing that I'm in this cycle, and this cycle will calm down after a certain point. But right now, it's all this. I think, during times of less chaos, you have to be really good at delegating and understanding that there are other people that can do maybe even one task that you might be needing to manage. You should largely on the work side, I think there should be a level of focus and obsession that this is something you really want to do. Like you enjoy building this, you enjoy researching this. This is something that drives you. And that energy is really important in this type of a field. You're interested in it, it drives you, and that's a powerful thing. I don't have, the traditional life stuff that a lot of other women have. So I can't really give advice on much more than this to the work-life balance, I guess.
Thank you so much. Actually, this reflects somehow how hard it is to do this. I address it in a way where I put boundaries. I try to limit uh, the interactions that I do with my personal life when I'm at work and vice versa. When I'm at the house, I don't do work stuff. So implementing boundaries really worked out for me, and it helped me. Um, um, let's also get to maybe if we can get an answer from someone else, because I have a feeling that women usually feel like it's their problem only to balance professional responsibilities and personal responsibilities. But I know that it's not only women's problem, and it would be really helpful to know how men deal with this, for example, if possible.
Hi, Nadan. I want to participate, and
Hi.
I hope that after me, probably Joe will
Yeah,
participate.
of course, yes.
So, um, like I'm a housewife, right now, but I'm also applying actively for finding a job in the professional skill that is more related to supply chain, manufacturing, and operations. And that industry is really demanding. If you have hand-ons on that, there's going to be times or like seasons, depends of the complexity of the project, where actually, I don't know, 8 hours is going to cross the boundary about like what is your life balance. And I think it's important to highlight what you just mentioned. So you need to be like as an individual, you need to set like what are your priorities. And same as Victoria was mentioned, also like what drives you, like professional speaking, that at some point you can forget that even you just need to like keep yourself hydrated, like drinking water or actually have your meals on time. So it's hard. I'm not going to I'm not going to lie that it's something that uh, that we have like certain discipline about it. Is something that you start to like building, right? So when you find a job, I guess that's the first boundary that you need to set. So when you have the interview with them, you need to find out like what's the work-life balance that they have, or like that the position is going to require, and what amount is going to require, and then you be honest about like if those if you are okay with like that time. Now, for instance, now that I'm a housewife and like I'm married, part of like my activities also imply chores like cook, try to have like the house, or some hobbies like gardening, and that requires time. So you're going to sacrifice like what, like time for sleeping, or probably like give up on like those hobbies activities, even like working out or like doing exercise. Maybe you're going to sacrifice skipping some meals. Uh, if you have like a partner, so that's when I'm inviting Joy to like bring up like this conversation. Is one of the things that work for us, uh, considering that the factor that we have the possibility to be remotely working, I mean, is not because you are at the house implies that you are available for the person, right? So one of the things that I encourage Joe to do, it was like, okay, I'm gonna share my calendar so you can take a look if I'm in a call, if I'm in a meeting. So try not to schedule or assume that I'm going to be available just because. So it's kind of like a project management with yourself, in the sense that have everything in your calendar helps in the sense that from this time to this time, I'm going to be like busy or I'm like focused. Like if you see it, like even in the computers, sometimes like the operation systems are just like uh, focus time, no? So it's something similar with like the calendar. Um, it's part of a culture. I am speaking from the experience that I've been having with companies in Latin America. In Latin America, there is a lot of small, medium companies, and for them is the personal has like the availability all the time, and they don't care if you eat, and they don't care if it's like 5:30 or if it's 7. If it's something that it needs to be done, the person needs to be available. So it's a part of actually create that culture of setting boundaries and say like, this is my calendar, you can have access to my calendar. If like something doesn't fit because I'm taking like a meeting or I'm preparing like a presentation, is let's try to respect back and forward. I think that's gonna be like a long path. And so try to wrap it up this. So for the positions that I've been applying imply like a lot of like traveling. So that's also like another factor, right? So when you're traveling, is like how much of that time are you gonna be willing to be out of the house? And with that is like leaving behind part of like the chores that you have and take like the other, allow like the other person to take it. And if the other person is going to be willing to take those responsibilities, just to say something, let's suppose that you have like a pet who's gonna feed them, or how much time are you going to be willing to actually like be out of the house? It's going to imply 90% of the time traveling and just like be at the house 10, or it's gonna be the other way around. So I don't know if that might answer your question. And Joe, do you want to participate?
Yes, thank you so much. I loved your answer. Actually, this makes a lot of sense. What you said gave me a lot of insight, and I'm actually gonna use this advice. Thank you so much.
I guess probably you could use me as a counterexample. I'm not great at setting boundaries. Um, a lot of times
Wonderful.
I get, I mean, I guess it sort of comes with salary employment where it's sort of you get paid to get the job done, not paid to work a certain number of hours. Um, and so I tend to strive for success, make sure that the goals are met, the timeline is met, the everything happens as quickly as it can so that we can make progress. Um, I've been working a lot with teams overseas in Malaysia, so I have a lot of late night meetings, early morning meetings in some cases. Um, I mean, I also, I don't know, I feel like that drives me to have trouble setting boundaries. It's hard for me to say like, oh, it's 5 p.m. Don't reach me till tomorrow. Um, I'm always trying to be available, trying to make sure that people are successful if they need my help or what have you. But at the same time, I also don't get heartburn if I need to, run an errand in the middle of the day, or if, I need to stop in the middle of something and go have lunch. It's like I'm really not worried about not being there for that half hour or whatever because I'm there all the time. Um, and a little bit of a change that's coming in my world is on March 1st, I'm going to be required to be in the office 4 days a week. Whereas from COVID until now, it's been, basically work from home if you want. Um, the way I've treated it is I go to the office when I need to. So a lot of it is I've got a prototype that I need to physically interact with, so I'm going to go to the office today. Or, or I have a key meeting that I need to be in person for, so I'm going to go to the office today. So I would probably go into the office typically a day or two a week, maybe sometimes 3. But it was because I needed to, not because somebody told me I had to. So I'm not especially excited about the upcoming months, but I guess just wait and see how bad that feels. I mean, obviously I did that up until COVID all the time. That was normal back then. But now knowing that I can be more effective and more efficient not doing that, it doesn't quite, I don't expect it to feel the same as it did before COVID. So anyhow, I'd say I'm not a very good example for setting boundaries, but you know, I don't know, maybe that example gives you something to avoid.
Christina, I saw.
Yes, thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, so it was it's not so much about boundaries, but it is relevant. It's something I noticed with kind of the return to school virtually, and this was true for undergrad, but especially in grad school. There are a lot of women in my program that they, for various reasons, whether it was family or other jobs or they were raising kids, they're back in school now. The kids are older or even out of the house, and they're getting their master's degree. And I just think this is really cool because it's never too late to, I don't want to say reinvent yourself, but if there was a goal that maybe you had, or life happens and your interests change, that you're not locked into something. And I was just having a conversation with my sister about this, how, our parents spent their entire careers at the same company, the same job. It was almost unheard of to change companies. And it was almost, kind of taboo to be like, oh, I left my job or I got laid off. And, we don't have that anymore. It's actually more unusual now to be at the same company your whole career. So I just thought that was a really it was a good observation that, like, it's not too late to invent yourself, but also I really appreciate that these programs do allow women to create an opportunity for women to say, like, I want to do this, or I want to get back to that, I want to go back to school, I want to change careers, and you're no longer bound by the, well, I had kids, so this is what I have to do now. So I think that's something that I've been really happy to observe returning to my studies. It's kind of a nice change in the landscape.
Yes, yes, definitely. Thank you.
I do think that's very important, and it's a wonderful opportunity, which perhaps we didn't have in the past. First of all, because we didn't have online education, but secondly, just for cultural reasons, we may not have had it. I would like to try to answer as the person who's probably the only parent in this meeting, except for my wife. I don't have anything very intelligent to say about it. I'm very in favor of people having kids, and it was the most rewarding experience of my life. But it's really hard to work in a demanding technical job and to have children at the same time. And how single parents do anything other than take care of their kids and work, I can't imagine. Luckily, I had a very supportive wife, and I hope I was supportive to her. And I'd just like to say out there for any men, if you have kids, you got to put all that macho stuff aside, and you've got to be an equal partner, and you got to change the diapers, you got to do the housework, you got to do whatever it can, because it's just a full-time job for two people. It's a full-time job for two people, to do that. But you can do it, you can do it. One thing, I don't think I was particularly good at maintaining work-life balance. I'm still not. I love oil painting. My wife gave me a wonderful set of oil paints, and I haven't done it in 2 years. Now, part of that is because I love public invention. I love the work that I'm doing. I do think it's important to manage your ambitions. Okay, I'm an extremely ambitious person in certain ways, or in the past I would have been called not necessarily ambitious but driven. And I was a very hard worker. but you don't want to live up to someone else's idea of what you should be doing. You know, like I've met people who are like, I need to be a team leader by the time I'm 28, or I need to be a partner by the time I'm 40 or something like that. And you just don't need those things, right? And at a lot of companies, there are people who work, probably 55 hours a week, and there are people who work 40 hours a week. And the people who work 40 hours a week are generally respected. You know, they may not get the promotion against the person who's working 55 hours a week, but so what, right? It's not that important in the scheme of things. And then I just have one other thought that I think is kind of important. Some leisure is more efficient than others. My wife and I basically didn't watch a television show for 15 years when we were raising our kids, because watching television is just a very inefficient form of recreation. Going for a walk or reading a book or something is a lot. You get more personal space in a 30-minute walk than you do from watching 2 hours of television. That may be kind of dumb, but that's all I got to say.
Not at all, actually. It's a great thought. Yes, thank you so much. And I feel that, I experienced that. For example, when it's raining, I cut out on my walks. So alternatively, what I do is I sit and watch something, and it's never the same. So I get what you're saying. Also, thank you so much for your input. Um, it's a heavy thought when going into these fields, knowing how much there is to put out there, and especially if there's too much that you want to do in the field, right? You're just and you're in your 20s or your 30s, and there's also personal things that you want to achieve. So it's just a heavy thought, and it's nice to have you guys as role models so we can get inspired from you.
Sorry about that. I was just agreeing with her, like saying yes, like I really do appreciate a lot of the stuff that you guys are sharing. Because you guys are role models to us. I really do look up to these, like, you know what I mean, interactions post each gathering because I learn a lot from you guys. I think like whether it be career advice, whether it be life advice, it's very encouraging to talk to you guys. So we value it.
Well, I'm going to say goodnight for now, and thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. As usual, public convention gathering nights are very, very excellent.